Be hit with road toll increases of up to 20 cent per trip on the M50 and other key routes next year. Transport Infrastructure Ireland says a further hike will be required in January 2024 based on an inflation rate of 6%. Sinn Féin spokesperson on transport Martin Kenny says the news is very disappointing for motorists.
I think the situation here that the toll companies are using, the inflation as an excuse for up toll roads prices is simply profiteering in my view. And I think the Minister, Jack Chambers, the Junior Minister for Responsibility for Roads Transport, needs to stand up to the toll companies.
Fleadh Cheoil na Héireann is underway in Mullingar in County Westmeath. The town is hosting the major event for the second year in a row. The Fleadh is the world's largest annual celebration of Irish music, language, song and dance. Vice Chair of the organising committee, Willie Penrose, says it's a massive boost to the town.
Mullingar itself is a tremendous, vibrant musical heritage area with lots of attractions as well as the music. But I mean, the Fleadh itself, Holders Cult here, one of the biggest organisations in Ireland clearly, and one of the biggest music and cultural organisations across Europe, with 430 branches across the world and thousands of memberships on a voluntary basis.
That's your news. More in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Unlike Man City, we fill all our seats. Plan your Premier League trip with Ryanair's low fares to London, Liverpool or Manchester.
A bright day with a mixture of sunshine and showers, highest temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 6. Our text number is 53106. It costs 30 cents, as well as listening on across the country on your radio and News Talk now. You can watch us in our live streams on YouTube and on Facebook. Time now for the Sunday Paper Review. We're delighted to be joined over the next 90 minutes in studio by the chief sub-editor and Irish boxing correspondent of The Sun, Kevin Byrne, and the Irish Independent GAA writer, Conor McKeon. Kevin and Conor, good afternoon.
Hi, John.
How are we, lads? Are we doing well?
Pretty good.
Very good, John. Thank you.
We'll go through the papers for anybody watching us on the digital and social channels. The front pages of the sports section. Sunday Independent here we have Oh no, Anana, New United keeper caught off guard by friendly fire in that friendly against Lens. Levy ignores Byrne's deadline for Kane deal, but that's not surprising. Waterford's final say Cork brace for Dacia Challenge Camogie special in the Sunday Independent Sport. We also have the Sunday Times sports section. Last week's final shows that football needs to change, writes Michael Foley. We also have not bad for starters, Ireland Open World Cup warm-ups with convincing win over Italy. And Sexton to play against Portugal, writes Peter O'Reilly. This is in this kind of unofficial game this week in the training camp. England and France stunned. Defeats in the rugby. We've got the Sunday World back page. Are you buying or selling? Harry Kane, Daniel Levy. Levy's game of 100 million transfer poker could see Kane leaving Tottenham for free in 2024. Going to be tough to top City points tally ahead of the Community Shield. Pat Spillane, wasteful carry, not good enough. We also have Red, slow and wooing Romeo Lavia. Cluxton sets the standard for the rest, right? Sean McGoldrick. And Klopp's men need time to gel. John Aldridge there on Liverpool. We have the back of the Sun on a Sunday. Good headline. Owen Kaiser, Doris's Day, about the rugby. Caelan Doris, 2 tries. Lundahoy on Rasmus Højlund, the new signing for Manchester United. Pep's a City sticker. He eyes deal beyond 2025. Bit of a nothing story though, isn't it? Josko win, Matoma's next up. Do Manchester City want Brighton's Caro Matoma? Sunday Mirror Sport. Byrne put their house on Kane. German giants line up luxury villa for England captain. Spurs star on brink of £95 million move. Arteta is not all about us. White drugs KO, so Anthony Joshua is without an opponent for Saturday's fight at London's O2 after Dillian White failed a drugs test. Back of the Irish Daily Mail. Up and running. Ireland start series with a win, but concern for Farrell over Conan. Don't think the concern is that big now. I think he's going to be okay. Rory Keane writes, how Dublin took 9 steps to heaven. So where do POW and Ireland go from here? Well, probably not to a new contract. And Spirit of Larkin, Camogie President Hilda Breslin talks integration, equity and inclusivity, and talking about her great grandfather James Larkin. Remember the 1913 lockout. We have a piece of Paul Rowan in the news section of the Sunday Times how international, I'll say that again, how internal turf war soured Ireland's tournament dream of the Women's World Cup. After Vera Pauw led the team to historic first finals, nothing seemed to go right, not least her relationship with captain Katie McCabe. Kind of a deep dive there. We have the Business Post. Man United's 900 million Adidas deal highlights club's enduring appeal globally, writes Ellie Donnelly. An Irish love affair with Man U has become an unrequited one. Don't know about that, given what's happening today in the Athletic Bilbao game. It'll be a full house at the Viva. And also an Ireland Thinks poll in the Sunday Independent with some sports elements to it. When do you think the All-Ireland hurling and football final should be played? 49% say September, 8% July. And we also have, following the public disagreement between Ireland women's soccer manager Vera Pauw and Katie McCabe, the captain, over substitution decisions, who do you believe is right? 36% Vera Pauw, 9% Katie McCabe, 16% neither, 39% don't know. I feel that it's only just to give Dublin and Kerry some breathing after last week, so we don't forget about it, and we're not talking about the Rugby World Cup and the Premier League returning Conor and Kevin so soon. And it probably dominates most of the articles in the Sunday papers today. Would you agree?
Yeah, it probably does. It's a very obvious jumping off point. The inter-county season, as we know, is over, and what happens at club level won't consume such a level of coverage over the next little while, because it takes a while to get to the point where there's anything that might be considered of national interest. And we had a Dublin Kerry final, and of like the build up was probably justified because there was such significance of it on the line. And I think the saturation of coverage in the week since kind of covers, like Michael Foley's piece is interesting today in the Sunday Times, because he broadens the thing from analysis as to how and why Dublin won into how you could use it maybe as a sign of football when it's played at the highest level, and the crisis basically that it's facing from an aesthetic point of view, from an entertainment point of view. Now I don't think the game last week is a fair kind of testing ground for that. Like, it was a very, very wet day, and in that sort of situation, teams are always going to run the ball more, because you can't play that skidded pass, that kind of hops off the turf. And when that happens, it can be very, very cagey and possession orientated. But I don't know, like I found last week, I don't know what you thought, lads, but I found it very sort of compelling at the same time. But maybe that's because of what was on the line. Maybe that's because of, we're so aware of the culture around the game. I suppose the test for all of this is if the alien came down from Mars, or if you suddenly got a bout of amnesia and you were shown the sport without knowing any of the significance over who was playing or what was on the line. Like, what was it subjectively entertaining? Would anybody say that for definite?
I would say I watched it pretty much as a neutral, and I did find it compelling and highly competitive. I guess the overall point is that the GA season in itself became, it wasn't really must-watch fare. The matches weren't
in football now.
In football, effectively, yeah. The matches weren't unmissable, and while the final itself was compelling, it didn't elevate. It didn't go beyond, and it wasn't a much hyped Kerry Dublin final, which kind of Michael Foley seems to suggest exists in the minds of people more than reality. Finals between the two counties have not really been complete crackers over the years, maybe semi-finals. But he talks about some of the like the hand passes and the kicks and solutions for making football more entertaining. He expands on a piece he did obviously with you in Off the Ball with Joe earlier in the week with Maurice Brosnan and Colm Keys as well. There's a number of suggestions there to make football a little bit more entertaining, and whether or not any of those will be taken up in the next few years, we'll see.
Yeah, I have skin in the game, so I can't really talk with objectivity. Because I'm from Dublin, but I found it incredibly tense and utterly enthralling.
Yeah, and I think both teams tried to still play.
As was last year's semi-final.
Yeah, and like, when was the last time we had a great All-Ireland final? Well, 2017. That was the last great All-Ireland final, because you had it between two teams who fancied themselves to play man-on-man and win the game. And what you had was a 1 point win for one of the teams. So I'm not sure we're ever going to come to that point ever again, where two teams will say, okay, we'll go man all over the pitch, we'll back ourselves. And I don't think any coach, you will ever have a situation where two coaches will approach the final utterly convinced that they will win on those terms, without even, there was no even +1 that day, but prior to that I'm not sure how many great All-Ireland finals there have been. You have to go back to 2008, maybe there was a great conclusion to that final. 2011 was great because of, again, the significance and how it played out towards the end.
I remember 05 Kerry Tyrone, I thought was an excellent
05 was an excellent final as well, but what I'm saying is I think they're far more rare than we...
By their nature, finals.
Yeah, I think they are. And by their nature, semi-finals. Hurling would be in the same bracket as well. Like, you think back to the last decade, from 2010 up to 2020, how many classic... But they all nearly meld into each other. We had unbelievable All-Ireland semi-finals. The finals did not live up to the same level of entertainment. But, there's a lot of coverage around today as to why Dublin won the game. I found this an interesting passage in Mick's piece in the Sunday Times, where he said the exhaustive analysis over the past week seemed to create a gap between Dublin and Kerry that felt larger than the actual 2-point margin, even though Kerry were level entering injury time, the width of a fingernail from victory. That's absolutely true, but what I'd also say about that is that, this Dublin team, more so than, say, the great Kerry team, or the great Limerick team, or the great Kilkenny team, who are really their only real comparable rivals for the greatest inter-county team of all time. The history of this Dublin team and the story of their greatness isn't necessarily the huge performances they go out when they tank a team. It's the number of times they've pulled it off when the title was on the line. Like, they have won so many All-Ireland finals now by 1 or 2 points. They were 3 points down in the 52nd minute on a wet day with poor scoring the last 8. That was a huge turnaround, and I think the enduring legacy of the Dublin team, when eventually it's all done and dusted and they do finally sail off into the sunset, is that that idea, the American notion of a clutch team and a clutch player. When the chips were all down and the All-Ireland was on the line, the number of times that they have held their nerve and executed the biggest plays isn't really uncanny.
Haven't lost into finals since 1994. Pat Spillane, wasteful Kerry have no one to blame but themselves. Dublin's physicality and their ability to translate turnovers into scores were key. Just some of the passages. Fenton's performance was the key. In his 8 previous duels against Kerry's Jack Barry, he was held scoreless in 5, only managed 1 in each of the other games. Last Sunday he had 31 possessions, scored 2 points and bossed the game from start to finish. And then he adds as well, there are several reasons why Kerry lost, not least because they surrendered 3-point leads on 2 occasions. They just got 2 points from play in the first half and only 1 in the first 22 minutes. In the last 26 minutes, they could only add 1 more point from play. They went 14 minutes without any score in the second half, converted just 9 out of 19 shots in open play. Their build-up play was too slow, too cautious. Too often they ran into cul-de-sacs. They didn't utilise their kicking game. They were slow to shoot.
It's for all the talk of a drab final and stuff, like it did really deliver in terms of box office names, stars to the fore. Obviously David Clifford had an off day for Kerry, and that probably cost them. It's been highlighted, I think, by both Pat Spillane and Colm O'Rourke in the Sunday Independent, that Kerry's greatest strength is their greatest weakness. So if you can somehow nullify him, which Dublin I suppose successfully did, even though he scored, what did he get?
2 from play and 1 free,
and set up 1-2 I think as well. So that's probably successful to nullify him. Otherwise he's scoring upwards of nearly 10 points and maybe adding a few as well. So if you can somewhat nullify him and bring your own big players to the fore, then you're going to deliver. And I guess for Dublin as well, the amount of storylines, the Desi Farrell storyline, which is touched on by Dermot Crowe in the Sunday Independent, just all the stuff he went through, as Dublin manager. He won in his first year, but then all the stuff that happened with COVID as well, he goes through it. He says the first All-Ireland in 2020 didn't earn him the credit winning an All-Ireland normally would do. It was riddled with caveats. Public opinion needed more persuasion. They didn't beat Kerry en route to winning. And the All-Ireland final was soon forgotten the following April. His lowest moment came with the exposure of the Dublin training session being conducted in breach of health restrictions, a PR disaster that led to a 12-week suspension for Farrell. And later on the piece, he mentions how the Dublin players such as James McCarthy and Brian Fenton said they did it for Desi. So, as well as the Dublin players making history, winning their 9th All-Ireland title, was it James McCarthy, Stephen Cluxton and Michael Simons, and other players, moving on to 8, 7, and all the conversation about the Footballer of the Year. I think there's lots of debate about that one as well. It did deliver in box office terms. Like, there were so many kind of star names to hang the headlines on, which is handy for us in journalism as well, because there's so many different points of entry to write about.
Yeah, you can even talk about Colin Pascal in his own guise as somebody worthy of an article. You could pick out so many, and Clifford obviously as well is a case study in himself. By the way, Clare won the Premier Junior Camogie Championship, beaten Tipperary by 3-7 to 1-8 at Croke Park. In football, Leicester have defeated Coventry by 2-1 in the championship. The best thing I saw in the papers all day, lads, was this photo above Sean McGoldrick's article. I don't know if you can see it there, folks, but there's a few things in Sean McGoldrick's article which is lauding Stephen Cluxton, and rightfully so. There's a quote here: "What is often overlooked is that it wasn't until 2011, Cluxton's 10th season and his 55th championship appearance, that he finally won an All-Ireland medal." And above that is a photo of Colin Gooch Cooper scoring in the 2011 final. It was early in the first half, if I remember rightly. Mick Fitzsimons, the face in anguish, and then Stephen Cluxton, just in pained expression on his face as the ball went into the back of the net. Who would have thought that later that day Cluxton would kick the winning point and Dublin would have 9 All-Irelands 12 years later? Amazing.
Yeah, I read a couple of pieces during the week, and it always...
The moment in time, snapshot in time, it could have gone the other way, you know.
But I'm always sort of slightly incredulous now when people go to the bother of wasting words by saying that Stephen Cluxton is probably the greatest goalkeeper of all time. I think like that argument is well and truly closed. The only question that's left is he the greatest footballer of all time? And you can definitely make that argument with what he did this year. Like, he had effectively a perfect season. He conceded 1 goal, and the 2 points that he kicked in the final were absolutely off the charts. But going back to the piece that Kevin mentioned about Desi Farrell, you know, with those guys coming back, with Jack and Paul Mannion and Stephen Cluxton, you know, you have to remember, you're taking a huge risk. You're running the risk of not winning, you know, and what does that do to your legacy then? What does that say? And there was a big sense maybe that if Kerry got another one, you know, had they won back to back, particularly beating Dublin in a final, which is not something that they've done since 85 or 86, and particularly after the bit of the commentary the previous year that, the Dublin team didn't have Conor O'Callaghan or the lads were away. You know, if Kerry had won that one, I think we'd have a significant erosion from the Dublin squad this year, and Kerry would be going on to win 3 in a row next year. Clifford would have won consecutive footballers of the year, which he might well still do, but the era would be over, I suppose, and that's what was at stake last Sunday, and that's why I think it was so compelling, because it wasn't just a case of, see, can we knock one more out of this? I think there was wider ramifications for people's legacies and what direction the next few years are going to go in football.
You don't think the era is over? I think the era is over for Dublin.
Yeah, it is, but I think, well, put it this way, if management stayed on and they kept, you know, erosion to the squad to a minimum. Now, I'm not sure where their motivation comes from for doing it again, but I think, and I know we'll probably talk about this, the season is now much shorter for inter-county players, so the commitment is obviously full on while they're there. But like, one of the best things that Dublin did this year, and actually Micheál Clifford does a great piece in the Daily Mail where he notes the 9 steps that Dublin took, or nine of the things that they did well to win an All-Ireland.
Yeah, it's a great piece, yeah.
One of the things that he left out, and that I thought was a huge element to it, which is the way they timed the season. You know, like, a lot of people didn't really get a sense of what was happening this year with the round robin until it was nearly
also
over.
Mayo winning the league, Galway being so good,
and for a team like Dublin, particularly with their age, with their age profile, and the players coming back and trying to, you know, find where they're coming. It wasn't about doing well in Division 2. It wasn't about winning Leinster at a canter. It wasn't even about, you know, beating Roscommon and Kildare early. All they had to do was get out of that group and peak at the right time. And the timing element of it, the fact that they can peak for those 3 or 4 games and win an All-Ireland, would lead you to believe that they could probably do it again. And I think the big question is whether they want to do it again.
You mentioned Cluxton. There's no debate about him being the greatest goalkeeper of all time, and possibly, you know, one of the greatest footballers of all time. Is he 41, 42? We've seen Buffon, it's mentioned by Sean McGoldrick, he's Gianluigi Buffon has retired at the age of 45. Do you think Cluxton has? I definitely think he has the ability to go on for a couple more years. He played a flawless final against Kerry. Haven't seen him make any mistakes. His kicks are as good as ever. 23 gathered by Dublin, and a couple of points as well. A flawless goalkeeping performance, and as well as that, probably just the confidence he gives the rest of the group. Do you think he has the desire, or I'm sure he has the ability to go on, but do you think he has the desire to go on a couple more years? Because if he stays on and Dublin lose 2 or 3 experienced players, they still retain his leadership at the back, and they still retain an awful lot of the experience that they need.
Well, I think if management stay around, there's a fair chance that the players who came back, now more particularly Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion, might stay on for another year, and then Dublin are a very serious prospect. The Cluxton thing is strange because, I do think part of the reason that he came in, or maybe the main reason that they invited him back in, was that there was injury issues with Evan Comerford, who had well and truly assumed the mantle as number one goalkeeper, and I think they were pretty happy. Not that anyone's ever going to be able to step into Stephen Cluxton's shoes, but Evan is one of the best goalkeepers in the country. He is an exceptional replacement for Cluxton. With Evan back fully fit now, would they be just kind of happy to leave it there? It would be the perfect way for Cluxton to go out. That was, some people that I know that were knocking great mileage out of the fact that, Kerry can never get revenge on Cluxton and some of these Dublin players because they'll never see them again.
Colin O'Rourke in the Sunday Independent. Dublin almost have developed a culture which is communist in tone. The individual is completely subservient to the team. No ego is allowed. That's one of his observations. The another one, Brian Fenton is central to this. He's the best midfielder of the last 50 years. So obviously he's better than Jack O'Shea if he says that. There were a lot of good ones in that time. He was brilliant on Sunday, and he and Kieran Kilkenny were safe havens for players to pass the ball to, knowing that they would use it wisely. Some of the writing on Dublin and Kerry.
O'Rourke was on form. I think he was enjoying both paying Dublin a few compliments, but also kind of reminding them that Meath, he's a Meath man at the same time, so he's thrown a few daggers in there as well, just a few gags at Dublin's expense. But like he mentions, as does Pat Spillane, how James McCarthy, he believes, was lucky to stay on the pitch for the duration of the match.
There's always a rub, isn't there?
A little one. And he says that Cluxton's his return can be proclaimed a complete success. He may even decide to stay on now that he has got a second wind. He might end up getting his last medal in the same envelope as the bus pass, as he doesn't like presentation functions.
We have Kevin Byrne here and Conor McKeon on the Sunday Paper Review. We're talking about Dublin and Kerry at the moment, plenty to get through between now and 3:30. Tommy Conlon, just a quote I liked here: in Test cricket they talk about building pressure on the dangerous batsman, get the bowlers to pin him down with balls he cannot play until eventually cracks and starts going for risky shots to get runs on the board. There may have been a parallel here with David Clifford in the last quarter. Dublin had kept the ball away from him for so long that the pressure had built inside his head. The result was anxiety in his normally immaculate kicking action. The big squeeze all over the pitch eventually paid dividends on the player they wanted to squeeze more than any other, on David Clifford. And I thought there was a very nice piece by Mark O'Shea actually in the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday, just talking about his own experience and his own sadness about losing his father in 2002 and Darren Moss's father obviously as well, and they lost the All-Ireland that year, and obviously David and Paulie have had a very difficult year losing their mother. And there's just a quote here: that's why this week I'm not alone in this. If the whole county could, it would wrap up the two lads, their sister Shelley and their father Dermot, in the most caring of embraces. And also, from a footballing perspective, Dubs shouting from McCarthy should not deny David his just reward in terms of being named Footballer of the Year. Yeah, I feel sorry for David. It was just didn't go his way last weekend.
It was an interesting one. I was keeping tabs just on like most people were who were at the game working at it, just to see how is it that Kerry get him the ball so much. So I was recording every possession just with a little dash down on my notebook, and after 23 minutes I had one little dash, and that was it. So there is probably some truth to the theory that by the time Kerry were actually able to get in possession, he hadn't really found his flow. Now, I think he finished the first half with 8 possessions. He'd set up a point, he'd scored one himself, he'd set up the goal, but he was getting on a lot of ball kind of at the edge of the D with his back to goal and just shifting it off to the players around him, which is really not the areas you want to get Clifford into. And then even in the second half, he took that shot from over on the right sideline, as we look at it from underneath the Hogan stand, and you were thinking that's probably not the kick that you want to be taking to get yourself into the game, but such was the kind of infrequency with which he was getting possession compared to the norm at that stage, I think it was all he had to go on. So it's tough. Like, it's an interesting question this week. If you take out the sentimentality that Mark O'Shea highlights very, very nicely, as you point out, you know, like, going into the final, I think Clifford was miles ahead in the Footballer of the Year. You know, like, so if you take his championship performances, he played 8 games. He had poor games against Tipperary in the first round of Munster, against Tyrone in the quarter-final, and arguably again in the final. But the other 5 were man of the match performances. But I suppose the question is, what weighting do you put on the final, and how much does the argument go against him because he had those?
But who does it go in favour of then? Does it go really in favour of James McCarthy then?
For the same reason, yeah. I mean,
is it Cluxton and Fitzsimons then?
Well, I think it's Fenton.
Yeah.
Like, if
for the third time.
Yeah, if it's not Clifford, I think it's Fenton. I still think the argument for Clifford is almost overwhelming. You know, I wouldn't be inclined to shout anybody down who makes the argument that Clifford is Footballer of the Year, because what he did going up to the final, I think, had him so far out in front. I think it's a strange year that way. You know, it's very weird in the history of the Footballer of the Year award. I've never seen a player get it after not having a good last game of the year, whether that's a final or a semi-final or whatever. But I think Clifford is a special case. I think
if memory serves me, I think Lee Keegan won one in a year that Dublin won the All-Ireland.
Andy Moran as well.
Andy Moran as well. Yes. So but both of them had good finals and good years, and kind of they put it up valiantly to Dublin on the day. Colin O'Rourke writes about it as well. He writes about Fenton. He says, with Dublin there's a freedom of expression for individuals which may appear contradictory. Brian Fenton is central to this. He's the best midfielder of the last 50 years, and there were a lot of good ones in that time. He was brilliant on Sunday, and he and Kieran Kilkenny were safe havens for players to pass the ball to. Like, Fenton stood up really hugely against Mayo, Monaghan and Kerry, and Dublin got over the line and won the All-Ireland.
Yeah, I think there's an issue with Fenton that he's so good and has been so good that unless he totally dominates games, like he's nearly a victim of his own standards now. We don't see his performances as being worthy of Footballer of the Year. We see it as being less worthy than his previous Footballer of the Year performances, which isn't the same thing. And actually, the year that Andy Moran won it, there was a strong enough case for Fenton. So, like, you could be in a situation where Fenton, who turned 30 or turns 30 this year, could be going for his 4th Footballer of the Year, which would actually bring him level with Jack O'Shea. But look, he's in that bracket. I'm not sure the Dublin players or people that are that close to the team are going to get too excited about Footballer of the Year anyway. It was very much about the collective this season.
Well, after writing it off for so many years, it doesn't matter. Like,
this to me was a real legacy game, lads. This was a real game for the history of Gaelic Athletic Association, and since 1884. To me, when I was growing up, Kerry were the impenetrable force. They were the Real Madrid. They were the establishment, and they always had Dublin's number, even in the 70s and 80s when Dublin won a couple of years against them, 76 and 77. When you're talking about the greats of the game, you're talking about Mick O'Connell, you're talking about Jack O'Shea, you're talking about Mick O'Dwyer on the line, you're talking about that team that won 8 All-Irelands in 12 seasons between 75 and 86. And Kerry, for me, were always the team at the top, and Heffo's Dublin broke that for a while, but not really consistently. Whereas I think when we're looking back at the Dublin legacy, we'll be talking about this team as these are some of the greatest players to ever play Gaelic football, and Stephen Cluxton and Brian Fenton are right at the front of that.
Yeah, James McCarthy too.
I'll do someone a disservice because I've read a few GA pieces today and I forget who wrote it, but one of the journalists wrote today that we're probably likely to, in 77 years, look upon Dublin. Now, most of us won't be here in 77 years, but we'll look upon this Dublin side as the team of the century.
Yeah,
it's very possible.
It's difficult, as I once again pointed to the Cluxton Fitzsimons anguish when Gooch put the ball in the back of the net in 2011. You just don't know what's going to change. I can't see Dublin winning the All-Ireland next year. I have to say, I've said that already on one of the programmes.
Who do you think's going to win next year? So
I think Galway and Derry are definitely there. I think it's wide open, but I just feel that there was a Kerry 86 vibe about this for me when Dublin. I just think there's nowhere else for these guys to go in terms of achievement if Cluxton, Fitzsimons, McCarthy, unless they just want to keep on going back and do it again. But it's always not best to go out at the top, because they just went out of the top. Completely went out of the top. Mannion McCaffrey came back. Kilkenny was there in the final. Desi Farrell's won 2 out of 4 now and deserves great credit for that. Pat Gilroy was back. It just felt like this was the last go.
Yeah, there's a big thing in kind of sports psychology or performance coaching. They talk about what's your why. And for Dublin in 2011, it was Dublin had not won an All-Ireland in 16 years. That group of players was responsible for delivering the All-Ireland for the GAA people of Dublin. the Jim Gavin team, it became very clear that they had an incredible bunch of players, a couple of generations of outstanding footballers, and it was about maximising what they had, and that resulted in them doing, achieving unprecedented and historic things. This year was about, can we finish this off? That's what it was about, the guys all coming together. That's what their why was. So after the game, nobody could say for definite they weren't going to come back, because literally there was no tomorrow for that Dublin team. It was all about that All-Ireland. It was all about this year. So I sense that when they come around to making plans for next year, there will be a few that can't find their why anymore. The whys are all taken up.
And carry a huge part of the why. Like last year, they broke Dublin in the semi-final. They're going for back-to-back. They are the most successful county of the history game. And there's a huge why for Kerry now. There's a huge why for Kerry to re-establish that dominance in the game as they lead with 38 All-Irelands. There's a huge why for the Limerick Hurlers next year, because 5 in a row has never been done.
I think the why is, it's a good jumping off point to introduce Michael Clifford's piece, The 9 Steps to Heaven, because the why is laid out very well here, and it's kind of something we were taught in journalism school, like multiple points of entry. So if you don't want to read one reason, or if you've had enough, go on to the next one. You read a paragraph, right, I get this one, but the 9 points are making James McCarthy captain. You can see how the players would rally and really push from the wedding feast. Obviously James McCarthy's wedding, there's a nice line to intro it. If the story of Dublin's All-Ireland campaign was ever committed to the big screen, not since The Deer Hunter would an opening wedding scene be more apt in setting the mood. While Michael Cimino captured the giddiness of a group of friends going to war, it turns out that James McCarthy's marriage to Clodagh O'Mahony last December managed something similar, albeit with a very different outcome. I think the story goes that Cluxton attended, did he, and they brought together the old and the new, the experienced and the newcomers, and there was all these conversations happening deep into the night with the Dublin players, and they forged a plan and went with it. I suppose next.
Well, the big thing there is, I think James McCarthy's the only Dublin player that's been married in the last 5 or 6 years not to have Sam Maguire at the wedding, so there might have been some sort of talking point about that as well.
Just I'm interested in your views on this Ireland Thinks poll, which was in the kind of the news section of the Sunday Independent, like a lot of political opinions about Leo Varadkar and Marilyn MacDonald and Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, all that kind of thing. But when do you think the All-Ireland hurling and the football final should be played? 49% September, 17% August, 8% July, 26% don't know, and I've no interest. Like that's a representation of the people of the country. A lot of the mass appeal around the inter-county season, and they feel they want a better tradition. Should they be listened to?
Well, so what I would say about that is this: there is no doubt that the All-Ireland finals are devalued, and that a lot of the magic of the finals, and it is very much a magical events, the two of them, are gone by virtue of the timing. And because of the timing, you have this knock-on effect where, the middle of July, people can't get hotels in Dublin. The national consciousness isn't as focused because the kids aren't in school, people are away on holidays. It's just not the same. So yes, they are absolutely devalued. They were far better events, Irish cultural events as much as Irish sporting events. Like a lot of us who are that way inclined, measure our lives in All-Ireland finals. You meet somebody from Donegal who's interested in football, somebody from Clare who's interested in hurling, you could name a year and the two you could yak away for an hour. There's something really, really nice about that. A lot of that has evaporated very, very quickly because of the timing of these games. So there's no doubt that it's devalued. But the argument against that is that you have to have it earlier in the year in order to provide a fair and equitable window for the clubs to play off, which represent 99% of the people in the GAA. So anybody who advocates for one has to accept the kind of collateral damage to the other. Now there are other things to take, like the GAA were very, to make it look as equitable as possible, they effectively drew a line through the middle of the year. There's the club half, there's the county half, which is fine, but I know people who are over senior club teams at the moment who are starting their championships and they've 7 or 8 players who are away on J1s or travelling. Whatever about getting used to the finals being in July, we haven't gotten used yet to the club championships starting in some cases in July, in a lot of cases early August, because people still do the things that they always did at that time of year. So I'm still not sure that it's the best way to split it, and people will get on and they get very angry and they say, well, if you're advocating for the inter-county championship, swallowing the club championship, I'm not. But what I'm saying is there's no doubt that the finals are devalued by virtue of the timing.
Just before we go to the break, why are the minor finals no longer being played at Croke Park before the All-Ireland finals? Because if you've got a young lad who may never make it in the game, to be able to tell their kids and grandkids that they played at Croke Park in a minor All-Ireland final, why is that being denied to them for the Clare and Derry minors this year, for example?
It was basically taken away because when they dropped it down to under 17, they felt that it was too young an age group to, for the thing to be taken that seriously, basically. That was the underlying reason, that if you're playing in Croke Park on All-Ireland final day, not only is there huge scrutiny and pressure on the players involved, but there's, the whole... it's supposed to be a development age group, but if under 17 players are still developing, but when you have the carrot of being All-Ireland minor champions in Croke Park, the sort of, the win at all cost mentality comes into it, and it does it a disservice. But again, that's a very good and valid reason, but you can't take away from the sense that it does take away.
There's got to be something, because I like a pint, right? But I was just sitting around just drinking pints, bored on my tree, before the Kilkenny Limerick game, because you couldn't go anywhere because of the rain, and all you're
drinking pints and bored.
Yeah, I know, responsibly, obviously. We got to take a break here. Kevin Byrne from the Irish Sun and Conor McKeon from the Irish Independent on the Sunday Paper Review. If you want to get a question or a comment into the lads here on your Sunday, please do on 53106. It costs 30 cents, and we'll be talking about Vera Pauw, Katie McCabe, the Camogie finals, and the return of football after this.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
InsureMyVan.ie. Hi, I'm Ken Doherty. For all van drivers and business owners, InsureMyVan.ie is Ireland's low-cost van and commercial insurance specialist. For high-quality van and all commercial insurances, call InsureMyVan.ie.
City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Virgin Media customers, the power to play lies in the palm of your hand. With our best price SIM plan, exclusively for you. Get unlimited data calls and texts for the lasting price of just €20 a month. Just add our free Spirit unlimited SIM plan to your Virgin broadband and enjoy. See virginmobile.ie. Virgin Media, it's playtime.
Terms and conditions apply. See virginmedia.ie.
Galvin Tullamore sale now on. Ireland's destination menswear store. Galvin sale now on.
232. 3 simple numbers. But for Audi, they signify more. More innovation and excitement. An invitation to experience progress you can feel. And a shift in mindset to greater expectations. Like the competition edition on the Audi A4 and A5 S-Line models. All part of our 232 range. Discover how progress makes you feel in a 232 Audi. And book a test drive today.
This week at Power City, check out our mega deals on Bosch, Neff, Dyson, Samsung and LG. For more information, go online to powercity.ie or call in store today.
Go full Lidl this bank holiday and fill the grill with mix and match Board B approved barbecue meats, 3 for €9. Sit back with deluxe New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, was $11.99, now $7.70. A raised back to school cost with €200,000 worth of vouchers to be won on the Lidl Plus stamp card. Go on, shop without compromise. Go full Lidl today. T's and C's apply. Get the facts for drinkaware. Visit drinkaware.ie.
You could be in Spain. Feels like 40 degrees. Most likely 18. I know the feeling. There's no breeze today. Not a bit. Oh, some sun cream in the eye there.
Here, a little help.
And it's raining. The Irish weather isn't for everyone, but energy from Flowgas is. Order your solar panels through Flowgas for as little as €5,500, so you can start saving on your electricity and do your bit to help the environment too. To start your solar energy journey, visit flowgas.ie. Flowgas, energy for everyone. Terms and conditions apply. Price inclusive of an SCAI grant of €2,400.
Things are heating up at the Arnott Summer Sale with final reductions of up to 70% off in-store and online. Ready, steady summer. The Arnott Summer Sale. It's on. Shop in-store and online at arnotts.ie.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for John Malloy until 6. We're continuing the Sunday paper review with the chief sub-editor and Irish boxing correspondent of The Sun, Kevin Byrne, and the Irish Independent GA writer, Conor McKeon, as well as listening on your radio across the country on News Talk here now. You can watch us in our live streams on YouTube and on Facebook. Clare won the Premier Junior final in Camogie in football. Leicester 2, Coventry 1, a result as well from the Championship. We're going to talk about the Republic of Ireland women's team and the fallout from the World Cup now. We had the homecoming on O'Connell Street this week, and it's been a very kind of strange end to Vera Pauw and the team's journey in Australia. Obviously 1 draw, 2 defeats. I thought we equipped ourselves well. First ever World Cup finals, played 2 teams ranked in the top 10 in the world. A few articles to go through. I'm just going to mention Paul Rowan's, which is actually in the news section of the Sunday Times. Paul Rowan, just a few quotes out of here. How internal turf war soured Ireland's tournament dream after Vera Pauw led the team to historic first finals. Nothing seemed to go right, not least her relationship with captain Katie McCabe. The Dutchwoman was accused of improper conduct as a coach in her previous job at Houston Dash in Texas in 2018. This was in relation to charges of weight-shaming players. Pauw is banned from coaching the National Women's Soccer League in the US as a result until she offers some contrition and goes on a re-education course, writes Paul Rowan. And Pauw, 60, strongly protested her innocence at a number of Ireland press conferences and elsewhere. Last February, Pauw said that she would be the storm when it came to clearing her name, with lawyers in the US getting involved on her behalf. And in terms of the Nigeria game, when McCabe went over to Pauw and urged her to make a change, she was heard shouting, "I'm telling you, freshen it up." And just not to expect as well any of the FAI's infamous non-disclosure agreements should Pauw end up leaving these shores. Her contract has not been renewed, or she hasn't been given a new one, as it were, for the upcoming Nations League and Euros campaign. It seems, reading the tea leaves, that she won't get one, whether that's fair or not. We do have a cloud over this whole Republic of Ireland manager-player situation. A disconnect, it seems, between the manager and the players. What else are you reading, Kevin, today in terms of the Irish team?
Yeah, there's a couple of good pieces on it in the sports sections, all right, John. And Mark Gallagher, who was over there in Australia with the team, has a 2-page spread with once again multiple points of entry, as I mentioned, in a different piece. But there's 3 things Vera Pauw got right, 3 she could have done better, the 3 best displays, and then there's a large 2-page spread on just her Vera Pauw's impact not being in doubt, but as the subhead says, it's time for change. And he goes into detail and to explain why he believes it is time for change. And it's an interesting story, this one, because I think like the plain people of Ireland would see Vera Pauw as having done quite a good job, wouldn't they? And there seems to be support out there for her. And maybe I've seen comments online, like I think in a different piece, it's Colin O'Rourke telling people don't be listening to social media. But I was reading a bit myself this week, and you can see like there's great support out there for Vera Pauw, and a lot of anger at the media for the way it's been reported. And it's a curious media story, this Vera Pauw one, because the first doubts about Vera Pauw's future as Ireland manager emerged in the media. The way that we're now reading into doubts, and there's a perception out there. I was at the homecoming on Thursday, I was speaking to a few fellow fans and stuff, and they were saying they believe that Vera Pauw has lost the dressing room. It's quite clear from the way the story is being reported, and
also the way the players are talking about it, being so kind of. And
then I see that detached, being directed at the media as they're trying to get Vera, or they're trying to get her out. But I gather from what I'm reading that the noises from the dressing room are that the link is broken between manager and players. So then it becomes a story of people are angry at player power as well, and is player power okay? Is it acceptable? And it's reality, isn't it? It's reality in modern football. Player power is significant, and if there is a disruption in the relationship between captain and manager, well then I suppose it's up to the FAI to investigate what's going on.
I suppose we weren't expecting player power if we qualify for World Cup for the first ever major tournament, not even a Euros qualification before. We're not expecting this type of seriousness and this type of, I suppose, narrative to develop around the Republic of Ireland.
I read a column online on the Mirror from Stewie Byrne the other day, and he was just it's just the way he laid it out. It was so kind of in your face, but he said Ireland's whole preparation for the World Cup was clouded by off-field stories and reports into this and that from Pauw's time in America. He says, again, I don't know the ins and outs of that either, but it doesn't change the fact that there was way too much of Vera Pauw before the tournament, and it did nothing for the team. And it seems that this, we've been talking about this, the noise for ages, and Ireland's preparation for the World Cup wasn't perfect. The the results at the World Cup weren't perfect, and I guess
they weren't
the
bad
FAI
either.
have an out now that that she doesn't have a contract, so they don't have to fire her. They just don't have
but
to
there's
renew.
a degree of be careful what you wish for, because Eamon Sweeney, there was a really good thing in his piece in the back of the Sunday Independent.
Very good
today.
piece.
Just talking about the fact that there's little evidence in support of the golden generation thesis. Such spells have occurred in the past. In 2010, an under-17 side, including Denise Sullivan, finished runners-up at the European Championship, made the World Cup quarter-finals. The 2014 under-19 team, with Connolly on board, reached the Euro semi-finals. But the under-19s have not qualified since, and through the under-17s, though they made the finals in 15 and 17, they failed to win a game. Nothing suggests that we possess better young talent than our peers.
Yeah, I just to go back to Kevin's point about, and I've seen this too, that people are kind of accusing the media of wanting to get rid of Vera Pauw. If you follow that train of thought logically, like the Irish media covering the Irish women's football team, they don't have any skin in the game when it comes to the manager. It's not as if, there's some budding Irish coach that they all know really well and they go for points with, and they're mad to get them into the job, and they see Pauw staying on there as being an inhibitant there. I could understand why you'd interpret from some of the pieces, because you had pieces where players were at a World Cup and they were being questioned about whether they'd support Vera Pauw staying on as manager. But in my experience, what journalists are trying to do in that situation is they're asking questions so they can try and portray what they believe to be a story. And again, without talking to any of the journalists, but just from reading the coverage of the World Cup, it would strike me that the people who were over there, and Mark Gallagher is a great example this morning in the Mail on Sunday, that the media picked up the vibe very strongly from the camp, that the support for Vera Pauw to continue in the role is practically non-existent, and that's what's driving this. Now, how that is linked to the story in America and how much it shrouded the build-up, I don't know. It would be a strange thing, in my experience, for players to turn against the manager who did good work with them, who they had a good relationship, who they thought were going to have success based on something that happened in the past. So it would be interesting to see how this one plays out. But
is it the case here that the players want to pick the manager?
I don't know. Maybe they're as annoyed at the noise as everyone else seems to be, as people seem to be, and or maybe the people of Ireland don't really care about the outside noise. They're sick reading about it.
If Vera Pauw doesn't continue in the Irish job, is it now all on the players in terms of whether they qualify? Is it all put on them?
I think the players have done quite well as well to perform and to get themselves to the World Cup. I don't think anyone's trying to suggest it's a golden generation, but if there is a breakdown in the relationship with the manager and her players, and we don't know because this hasn't been directly said, it's hinted at, and
I could pull out, because they've been very quiet, or like they haven't said anything of the last few weeks, and whether that's tactical or not, I don't know. They could pull a rabbit out of the hat and say Pauw's got a new deal, but it's very unlikely, it seems.
And like Conor was saying, like the players have come out the bat for Stephen Kenny on the Ireland men's team,
very strongly.
What do you think of the manager? He is the right man for the job to carry, and the results have been far worse for the men's team.
And that also calms and kind of almost suppresses the criticism of Stephen Kenny.
The players, the Ireland women's players have been asked directly, do you think Vera Pauw is the right woman to bring us into the next?
They've given better answers than you would in Dáil Éireann.
It's good. So, and I think one of the journalists today suggested it's almost like a pact. The players have said, we will answer in a certain way.
You know what? The whole thing is just sad. I think it's sad. Well,
I would if you take it at a very, very basic sort of touchstone level, like qualifying the team for a first World Cup, that's major credit in the bank. I also think, and maybe this has no relevance at all, but the controversy that brought the team to kind of national front pages over the Celtic Symphony in the dressing room, I thought she handled that with incredible, I thought she was brilliant in all of that. She was incredibly sensitive around it. She showed brilliant duty of care to the players that were involved, while at the same time, displaying contrition, without kind of just bending the knee. I thought she was brilliant around that. And to me, that kind of enhanced the reputation of Vera Pauw, because that's a very difficult situation to manage on the fly.
That's mentioned as one of the three positive things from one of the three things that Vera got right by Mark Gallagher in the Mail on Sunday. He says Pauw seemed untouchable the day after that contentious sing-song in the Hampden dressing room, and the even-handed, thoughtful manner in which she addressed the controversy and diffused the situation only heightened public affection for the Dutch woman, who, let's not forget as well, has been very open about her history of sexual abuse and stuff like that as well, and it's brought her a place in the nation's hearts, I'd suggest. But another thing I found this quite interesting in Mark's piece. three things she could have done better, and he mentioned substitutions, obviously, which led to the little melee with Katie McCabe, squad selection, and parachuting in players. That's you could discuss that for an entire show, I'd say. But then the last one is interesting. Keep stum. He says Paul wouldn't make the best poker player, while most managers make an art form out of giving nothing away. Pau often replied to anything she was asked, often not to the betterment of the situation, such as needlessly naming Sinead Farley when discussing her spat with McCabe, consistently saying her contract position was clear, also didn't sit well with the players. I just find it funny that we want brute honesty from managers and players.
Do Irish people like direct?
No.
We say we want it, and we do want it, but then sometimes when and like we don't like it when someone seems to be pulling the wool over our eyes as well, because I think a few weeks ago, like when John Kiley said, I wouldn't ask my goalkeeper about his medical situation, that's not for me to ask, and you're like, but he's your starting goalkeeper, surely you want to know the condition of his eyes. So we don't want that sort of stuff, but at the same but then when a manager comes out and just doesn't show any political nous at all, and just throws it straight down the line,
probably in some way, maybe not fully, but some way paying for no filter. Like, it's pure no filter. It's great for the media and everything, and if it's just complete honesty in terms of what's said, but maybe that's not the most diplomatic. And
we can see the results when then the captain is putting out zipped mouth emojis the minute the World Cup campaign is over. But that has to hint at something else. Like, that can't just be over one row on the sideline in the 70th minute of a World Cup match. Dead rubber, you know. There has to be. There surely is more. But then again, I'm just guessing. Just another.
We're all in the dark, and it will all come out. And after 3 o'clock, we'll talk about Camogie, this senior final. Some really good writing today in it, and also rugby as well. But just to bring us to the break, just to actually link that, leader in waiting, Declan Rice, in the Sunday Times, Arsenal signing the former West Ham captain, intended to give them the beating heart missing since the days of Vieira, talking about his rejection from Chelsea and his vocal nature in the dressing room, and about his former club academy director West Ham, Terry Wesley, saying that we got a process called clean feedback, but you couldn't have it with a lot of young players and their parents because they couldn't take it. They wanted it fluffy, Wesley says of the meetings where academy players' weaknesses were relayed to them in clear terms. Declan says he couldn't have done it any other way. He needed the clean feedback so he could take ownership of it and address it. That's a rare thing, and that desire to get better rubs off on everybody in the group and can take them to the next level. Maybe Vera Pauw was an advocate of the clean feedback.
Well, I think the Declan Rice signing so far is the most interesting signing of all the Premier League clubs. I watched a lot of Arsenal last year, and I think a lot of people connected their fading out in the title race to the injury to William Saliba, and that was definitely true. But also, I think it was very much tied to the loss of form, which I think was probably connected to an injury of Thomas Partey at the base of the midfield. Like, he's a very, very underrated player in that position. He processes a lot of ball that in a very pressurised situation and puts Arsenal on the front foot again. And when you spend £105 million on a player for that position, which Arsenal have done, I think that emphasises what an important role that is in the Arsenal team. And that's where Rice is going to come and where he's going to build, you would imagine, over the next few years. But it'll be an interesting... I think a lot of us have taken interest in Declan Rice since he almost played for Ireland, and you look at the two biggest British transfer fees now are for Jack Grealish and Declan Rice, and you do wonder what would happen had they played for Ireland. Whether they'd still be at Aston Villa and West Ham, or would they have commanded anywhere near the same transfer price? Because obviously you're not just, Arsenal aren't just paying £105 million for a pivot in midfield. They're paying £105 million for a cast iron England certainty at the base of midfield, and I'm not sure that the price tag is quite as high for the cast iron certainty at the base of the Ireland midfield. But I just think he's a really interesting signing, and I watched last year's Conference League final, the thing the West Ham won, and he spoke so well after it as well, and it made me kind of, I think, pine for him in an Ireland shirt a little bit more.
We will talk about Manchester United and their visit to Dublin. There's a lot of writing about that in the papers. The Camogie senior final, some really good writing on that, and also rugby about the World Cup prep and David Walsh and the All Blacks, and also the Basque country and the influence on Basque coaches in football as well. So plenty to talk about on the paper review between 3 and 3:30 with Conor McKeon of the Irish Independent and Kevin Byrne of the Irish Sun. If you want to ask a question or make an observation or give an opinion, you can Shannon 5-3-106. Clare have won the Premier Junior Camogie final, and it's Leicester 2, Coventry 1 a result from the Championship. At the moment, Leeds, back in the Championship, are trailing Cardiff by 1-0. John Duggan here with you, sitting in for John Malloy today, and we're back after the news.
This weekend on News Talk, we're celebrating summer with Aldi, your go-to destination for the ultimate Irish barbecue fresh meat experience. For your chance to win a €1,000 Aldi gift card, check out newstalk.com/Aldi.
From fuss-free hotel breaks to luxury Mediterranean escapes, make it a summer to remember with Go Breaks. We can't guarantee the weather, but we can guarantee amazing value hotel deals for every budget. Search gobreaks.ie and check out hotels across Ireland and Europe from just €115 per night. Go on, go for it. And go experience, go explore with Go Breaks, as recommended by News Talk. Go Breaks. T's and C's at gobreaks.ie.
Household electronic and lighting waste? Recycle them for free with WE at your local authority recycling centre or participating electrical retailer. See weIreland.ie.
Let's count all the reasons why you love Kildare Village. A fantastic day out, your favourite brands, wonderful eateries, the playground, free parking and car charging, and late night shopping. Now, add the Colorama Summer Festival, a celebration of art, music and wellness. Do we even need to mention the spectacular savings? Kildare Village, where the possibilities are endless. For the full Colorama programme, see kildarevillage.com.
Remember your first wheels. Forget 123.ie. Remember your first family car. Forget 123.ie. With more benefits included than almost any car insurer in Ireland, you can spend more time remembering the important things and forget us until you need us. 123.ie. Give better a try. Acceptance criteria, T's and C's apply based on comparative research from August 2022. 123 Money Limited, trading as 123.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. RSA Insurance Ireland, DAC, provides 123.ie car insurance.
Virgin Media customers, the power to play lies in the palm of your hand. With our best price SIM plan, exclusively for you. Get unlimited data calls and texts for the lasting price of just €20 a month. Just add our free Spirit unlimited SIM plan to your Virgin broadband and enjoy. See virginmobile.ie. Virgin Media, it's playtime.
Terms and conditions apply. See virginmedia.ie.
It's tough deciding what to do on a Brittany Ferries holiday to Spain. City break or country escape? Tapas in the bar or seafood on the beach? Time together or time to yourselves? Decisions. Whatever you want from your summer break, there's still time to book a more relaxing Spanish holiday with Brittany Ferries. With crossings from Rosslare to Bilbao, it could be the best decision you're yet to make. Search Brittany Ferries today.
As you already know, you can listen back to all our shows on newstalk.com/podcasts. But did you know that we also have original podcasts that you can listen to wherever, whenever? Show Me the Science with Professor Luke O'Neill.
Flaky earwax, syrupy earwax, there's various sort of grades of earwax.
Inside the Crime with Frank Graney.
As friends and colleagues tried to come to terms with the news that Charles was dead, a team of detectives were combing his home for clues.
And so much more.
Hi there, I'm Quisha.
And I'm Shane.
And this is News 90.
This is the story of the Good Friday Agreement as I remember it.
We sat down on the first floor in our shop to talk life and leadership.
St. Bridget is getting more attention than ever before. Well, let me explain.
Original podcasts available now on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud. On 106 to 108 FM, on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud and smart speakers. This is News Talk.
Good afternoon, I'm Claire McNamara. The funeral of the late singer Sinead O'Connor will be held on Tuesday. The cortege is to travel along the seafront in Bray in County Wicklow before continuing on to a private burial. It will pass the Star's home where she lived for 15 years, where people have been leaving flowers there since her death. Motorists have been dealt another financial blow as tolls are set to rise for a second time in 6 months. On the M4, the toll for cars is set to increase by 20 cent, bringing it to €3.40. The price of using all toll roads bar Dublin's Port Tunnel jumped by 10% last month. Sinn Féin's spokesperson on transport, Martin Kenny, says the increase will put further pressure on motorists struggling with fuel costs.
Of course, this is the result of a bad situation that occurred in the past when these public-private partnerships were put in place. They were a bad deal for motorists and they were a bad deal for the public, and particularly, those who have no other option but to use these roads to get to work every day. And it's just simply going to be a disaster for so many people who are struggling so hard with the high cost of fuel and other things at the moment.
Fleadh Cheoil na Héireann has kicked off in Mullingar. The festival, which is the world's largest annual celebration of Irish music and dance, is returning to Westmeath town for a second year running. Taoiseach Líor Varadkar officially opened the 8-day event at a ceremony in the town this afternoon. This volunteer says Mullingar is ready for another year of Fleadh.
There's so much happening all year. We haven't stopped. Everybody's putting extra into it. Everybody is staying in town. Last year an awful lot of people left the town. Now they realise how good it was. They're all staying in town. It's going to be bigger and better than any other year. Definitely.
Elon Musk says his social media platform X, formerly Twitter, will live stream his fight with rival Mark Zuckerberg. The Tesla boss and the man who runs the Meta Group, which includes Facebook and Instagram, agreed to a cage match for charity. We're told profits from it will go to an organisation for veterans. That's your news. More in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Calling all swingers. Support Rory in Europe's Ryder Cup team in September with Ryanair's low fares to Rome.
A bright day with a mixture of sunshine and showers, highest temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for John Malloy until 6. We're continuing the Sunday paper review with the chief sub-editor and Irish boxing correspondent of The Sun, Kevin Byrne, and the Irish Independent GA writer Conor McKeon, as well as listening on News Talk now across the country. You can also watch us if you like on the live streams for digital, on social, on YouTube and Facebook. Just the Manchester City team is in for the Community Shield. 4 o'clock kick-off against Arsenal at Wembley. Ortega, Walker, Stones, Diaz, Akanji, Rodri, Kovacic, Silva, Grealish, Alvarez and Haaland. So quite a strong Manchester City team. We're just waiting for the Arsenal team to come in and we will bring it to you as soon as we can. And obviously as well, we've got Camogie today. Meath 1-1, Derry 3 points in the intermediate final. 15 minutes on the watch at Croke Park. Earlier, Clare beat Tipperary by 3-7 to 1-9 in the Premier Junior decider. And we have Cork and Waterford throwing in at 5 o'clock. It's a good segue to the writing about the Camogie final. Really good stuff. Derek O'Hare has been really the leading writer on Camogie in the last few years, and a great piece today on Brianna O'Regan, the Waterford goalkeeper. And I'll just kind of read this out, and not much I can add to it, but O'Regan's spoken openly about the death of her parents Brian and Johanna and 21-month-old sister Niamh in a fire in her home in Ballybeg. She escaped along with her brothers Cian and Aaron. Grandparents Patrick and Joan, Brian's parents, took the trio in, and along with Karen, their aunt, and the community support, they've thrived. Brian was a Mount Sion man through originally hurling with Rowan Moore. He loved greyhounds. Brianna started at Mount Sion but had to move to Dallasat to play Camogie. She and her granddad got into greyhounds in a big way. It was something they all did together, a way to remember Brian. Camogie kind of saved my life, she told me 3 years ago, telling Derek O'Hare, and having the greyhounds as well. You kept on kind of pottering around with them. I had and still have great people around me. In another conversation last year, she emphasised the importance of not bottling up pain in an era when mental health concerns among young people have never been greater. The younger generation now, they don't want to talk, they find it embarrassing, but I don't really think it is, she said last year. If you need help, even if you have a friend to talk to, you have to. Otherwise, you're going to be down in the dumps and you're going to be taking your anger out on people that you don't mean to. So she talks about her family and how today's All-Ireland final will be testing in a way far beyond anything might throw at her this evening. So really good article with Derek O'Hare and Brianna O'Regan there in the Sunday Independent, and look, all you can do is wish her the best today. I don't think I can add anything to that. There's also writing in the other papers as well, and in the Sunday Independent on the Cork Camogie setup ahead of today.
Yeah, just on the Brianna O'Regan piece, when she talks about not kind of, bottling up things that had happened to you. Like, I think she was 7 when that fire happened, and I'm not sure how anybody would be expected to process that. But the jumping off point of the interview, or the piece that Darragh O'Connor does about Brianna O'Regan, is talking about the final free of the semi-final when she came up. and I think it was Paul Flynn, who is a selector or a coach with the Waterford hurlers, one of the great free takers in hurling history, came up and beckoned her to take the free, and she stuck it over the bar, and she turned around and she kind of pointed, and it looked like a kind of a, an almost a gloating point, but the point was that she was kind of pointing up to the heavens, and her parents and her sister, who was an infant at the time of the fire, 21-year-old sister Niamh, they were the people that she was saluting. And I would challenge any neutral today that watching that Camogie final not to shout for Brianna O'Regan and for Waterford more generally, and just to maybe expand the point about the Camogie final, because it's a big day for Camogie. This is the first time since 2012 so since 2012 Kilkenny, Galway and Cork have been in every final, and nobody else has been in a final. And I think this is the first time since 2014. Like every league final since 2014 has been between two of Cork, Galway and Kilkenny. And so that's the last 20 national finals. And I think, at a time when women's football at intercounty level has undergone an absolute surge in popularity, a huge surge in popularity, which was evidenced in the annual breaking the attendance records, and then you had this great Dublin team, and then Meath came from effectively nowhere and changed the game, and we've gotten to know a lot of those players. Camogie hasn't had the same surge in kind of floating voter interest, if you want to put it like that. And part of it, I just think, is fatigue. It's which two of Galway, Cork and Kilkenny are going to be in the final. So, this is Waterford's first final since 1945. But I think on a more general point, it's the first time a county other than Galway, Cork and Kilkenny have been in it since 2012. So for that reason, I think it feels a bit like a breath of fresh air going into the week, and it just gives you more and more angles, I think, from which to come at it.
It reminds me of the Meath ladies footballers in a way, the way they came out of intermediate and then beat Dublin and won 2 in a row and had strong personalities in their team, and whether Waterford do it today or not, and I'd echo your sentiments about Brianna O'Regan. It's been a difficult journey for her.
In the previous page in the Sunday Independent, Aoife Sheehan is writing, and towards the end of her piece she says Camogie needs this oxygen in a year filled with frustrating off-field events such as UL's elimination from the Ashbourne Cup just days before the competition, the scheduling of the cancelled All-Star trip a couple of weeks before Championship, and the dual fixture clashes, which is alluded to also in a piece with the Callahan sisters. The Camogie Association must be satisfied that Waterford have made it to the final. This gives the game a welcome boost. And something else that gives the game a welcome boost is probably the writing of journalists like Darragh O'Cahir. I'd love to hear his word count at the end of the season for ladies football and Camogie. He must be pushing 1 million words on this. Like he's put out some great stories.
It's a great service as well, because anybody can just Cork are playing Waterford today. This is the build up. These are the facts. This is 1945. Cork haven't won in 5 years, but he goes in, he digs deep, and he gets the stories.
It's all about the people. Every sports person, every person has a backstory, and most people walking around don't get the opportunity to tell their backstory in national media or whatever, but sports people do, and that's probably been, for me, working in media, the biggest breath of fresh air since the 20 for 20 campaign and the emergence of women's sport as a feature in the national media. You're getting to hear the backstories of far more sports people from different backgrounds and stuff. Like it gets a bit, in GAA, the footballers in rugby, there's a lot of similar backstories. They don't really share as much, but the female stars have been doing so, and look, there's no backstory more heartbreaking than Brianna O'Regan's. It's nearly upsetting to read, but you can only wish her well. And she's a bit of a prodigy herself, in goals for Waterford since the age of 16, and they're up against it today, but I'm sure the neutrals will be shouting for
No, we all understand. We wish Brianna and everybody Waterford well. Cork, from their perspective, will be looking to win, and the Callahan, it's a good piece in the Sunday Independent, just in the inside of how much it means. Remember, Niall Callahan, the late 80s, was a teak tough Cork defender, won a couple of All-Irelands. Maeve and Orla, his daughter's playing for Cork today. It was a really good insight in the piece into how devastating it can be to lose, as Cork have the last couple of years, and just the bonds that they have, that they don't like being out of the unit because it becomes such a family.
It'll be like the Dubs, you know what I mean? They've lost 2 in a row now at the semi-final stage, I think.
Well, they've beaten Kilkenny and Galway to get here today.
Yeah.
So to do that is difficult in itself.
Yeah, I think nobody has a huge amount of sympathy for the Goliath and the David and Goliath pairing off, and that's probably the form that the Cork assume, just because they are one of the big three, and you know they knocked out the other two to get to the final. But I was at the league final this year, and they were absolutely heartbroken afterwards. I think that was 5 national finals they lost on the trot. So you know, while I think most people will shout for Waterford, I think there's a lot on the line here for Cork as well. You know, eventually, you know, all that kind of heartache and heartbreak tends to sort of. I think, you know, today is a big day for them too.
There's an article you referenced in the break there in the Irish Daily Mail, Philip Lanigan and Hilda Breslin. She is the Camogie boss, and she's the great-granddaughter of Jim Larkin, the man of the 1913 lockout.
Yeah. I thought this is, so first of all, it's a really good interview that Philip has done with Hilda Breslin. I feel that maybe the Hilda Breslins of this world don't maybe speak often enough in this kind of scenario. I mean, there is a certain irony that she's a great granddaughter of James Larkin in a season when, you know, Camogie players were on strike over their treatment. But they addressed that in this. This is, you can link this very closely to Aoife Sheehan's pieces today in the Sunday Independent, because Aoife quite rightly makes the point that it has been a tough year for the Camogie Association. I was in here with you, I think, and Sarah O'Donovan after the issue.
It's around the All-Stars, isn't it?
No, it was around the UL. Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah.
UL, it was a disgrace what happened to them in the Ashbourne Cup. They asked what scoring difference they needed to overcome. They achieved that scoring difference, and then they were told retrospectively that they were given the wrong, and they were thrown out. I know that they did not get any satisfaction whatsoever from the Camogie Association. Then they organised an All-Stars tour the week before the start of the Munster Camogie Championship, which the Cork players said they wouldn't go on, and then they ended up having to cancel the entire tour to Canada. And then you obviously have the situation with players who've been on strike. Now that's across ladies football and Camogie as well. But it has been a difficult situation. It's good that Hilda Breslin kind of addresses all of this, and she makes a really good point here in the interview with Philip Lanigan. And she says it's easy enough for people to call for equality, because I don't think, you know, any of us here, or, you know, people involved in the GAA in the men's games will argue against equality, but will they be willing to accept that the money that the GAA generates, that more of it is being funneled away from the men's games, and that the facilities, because effectively, you know, this is the problem. You know, who are the players who are protesting to? Are they protesting to their own associations who are maxing out on their own revenue streams and don't really, or are they protesting to the GAA? And if they're protesting to the GAA, well, clearly there's some sort of fundamental change that needs to come. They're
probably protesting to Ireland Inc.
Well, that's true, but...
And Ireland Inc. funds the GAA.
Well, Hilda Breslin makes this point. The male player is funded by a GAA that has a turnover somewhere in the region of 60 million. We have a turnover somewhere in the region of 3 million, as has ladies football. So that's why ladies football and Camogie, that's why they don't have the same level of care and player welfare, because effectively they can't afford it.
And they're independent bodies.
And they're independent bodies. And this is where it all comes back to it. You know, John Kiley came out at his pre-All-Ireland final press conference in support of Camogie players and ladies footballers. But again, you know, Hilda Breslin was making the point, well, you know, would he be as supportive if it meant that they couldn't train in the Gaelic grounds on a Tuesday night because the Camogie players, because that's effectively how the inter-county Camogie and ladies football operate. They get the scraps, you know, and obviously if you have a more equal situation, that won't be the equation. Here's the quote from Hilda Breslin. Is John Kiley going to say, I don't need to train in Limerick, I can train somewhere else because the LGFA or the Camogie Association needs to be in these pitches? So, you know, it's a bit of an administrative nightmare, basically, because what you have is the men's association, the GAA, have the access and the running of all the facilities, and then what you have is independent associations which govern the women's games, women's football and camogie, who basically have to live off scraps. That is inherently unequal. Like, you know, that is inequality personified. But until they all take the big step of coming under the one umbrella, you know, that sort of thing is inevitable.
It's hypothetical about John Kiely, because you can ask the question of any male manager.
No, but I think the only reason that John Kiely is brought up there is because he kind of said it himself at the pre-All-Ireland press conference.
There is a sense of...
You're not going to say anything else.
There is a sense of calling out people who express support online or in their words, but now she wants to see it in their deeds, because she mentions earlier in the piece how... you know, the 2020 campaign pricked people's consciences a bit. There's a lot of lip service that goes on about supporting girls, supporting women. You know, the idea that I support my whole family the same, I treat my girls the same, but I actually attend my boys' matches and I don't attend my girls' matches. It doesn't matter what you tweet or it doesn't matter what you post. If you're not sitting in the stands, you're not supporting women's sport. That's the reality. 6 counties in the Camogie final today will attract about 30,000 fans, with Croke Park has... and she says later on, we can all explain why that can't happen. I can tell you that if I don't have 80,000 in Croke Park on Sunday, I don't have the revenue to support a female player the same way as the GAA have the revenue to support a male player, and that's the reality. So there's a bit of a call, there's a bit of a confrontational approach as well, which, you know, no harm.
Well, I think that anybody who's got a profile in the men's game that comes out in support of equity and equality is doing a good thing. And then it's up to the Mary McAleeses, the Tom Ryans and these kind of people, the Hilda Bresons, to get their heads together and sort it out and get merged. And she says she hopes it'll happen in 2026. So, but this, when I just read this article, there's only one word that came out of this: is the realpolitik of money. It's all about money.
Yeah, that's essentially it. And, you know, and power and facilities and all of those things, that's what kind of goes into the pot, because like you're talking about taking 3 associations and making it into one, and the level of intricacy that's going to go into that is crazy. But you also have a situation where, you know, Sport Ireland fund all the major associations, and they all, by a certain date, I think it's next year, have to have a particular percentage of representation that are female on their highest board, whatever that is. And obviously in the GAA they don't have that kind of representation, because a lot of the high ranking or whatever female administrators are on the Camogie Association, the Women's Football Association. So it's a bit of a mess that way. Like it's in everyone's benefits to get to the end game, but it's so complicated to get. They've got to
get it right as well. Just as someone who I follow like boxing and particularly amateur boxing, and you know, they brought in equity and equality in Olympic boxing, but it's come at a huge cost. Like basically they've cut the number of men's divisions. So what the Olympics did is they said, we're not going to increase the number of athletes who go to the boxing tournament. We're just going to reduce the number of men and add in the number of women, which is, you know, increased year on year or tournament on tournament. As a result, for men, it's more difficult now than ever to qualify for the Olympics in fewer weight categories. And what happens then is the governments only fund those weight categories. So a load of boxers that are just left out in the cold, their kind of careers and hopes of being an Olympic boxer are over, effectively, unless they can maybe put on 5 kilos or cut 5 kilos to fit into a weight category that doesn't really suit them. It's a different scenario to the GAA, but I'm just saying it was an imperfect scenario. Instead of trying to grow the sport for equality, what they did was they mashed it all in together, and they didn't get it right, in my opinion. It's led to a lot of recrimination. It's possibly, you know, one of the foundational stones of the breakaway groups that are all happening now. Governments and associations are very unhappy with the way the Olympics, in their perception, have ruined the sport, and now they're rebelling against that. So there's such a knock-on effect if you don't get it right.
Like even say for just, this is a very casual example, in the GAA, a lot of the GAA's revenue, or a big proportion of the GAA's revenue over the next few years, will be committed to major infrastructure projects in Casement Park, in Park Talton in Louth, and in St Conleth's Park in Newbridge. That's the sort of expense that, you know, like if you take the figures that Hilda Breslin presents there, that the GAA's turnover is 60 million, the Camogie's Association turnover is 3 million. So now all of a sudden it's 63 million, and you have twice as many people that you have to govern. Well, somewhere along the line you're going to lose it.
Well, if this happens in 2026, and if it does happen, I think everybody's going to need to see what it looks like before it happens. So there's no surprises, but it's 3 years away at least. Our Arsenal team is in for the Community Shield. Ramsdale, White, Saliba, Gabrielle, Timber. Partey, Rice, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli and Havertz. So Havertz, Rice and Timber all starting today at Wembley against Manchester City. Manchester United, by the way, at 4 o'clock are kicking off in Dublin against Athletic Bilbao. A sellout. You were, Kevin Byrne, kind of remarking on the articles in the Business Post about this and
yeah, let me just dig it out here, John. Yeah, a sellout is a good way of putting it. All right, let me just dig it out here now.
I have it for you here.
I'd be a Man United fan myself, but I wouldn't dream of going to this fixture.
Why not? Because of the ticket prices?
It's not authentic. Is it? You know, if I'm attending a football match in Ireland, I'd rather attend a League of Ireland match. That's just personal.
But if you're living in Dublin and like I know the tickets are expensive today, I don't know if they're all €110. I know
how much they are.
The gentleman says here, James McDermott in the Business Post. But if
premium level.
But if you're living in Dublin and want to bring your kids down to the Aviva to watch Man United, what's the harm in that?
No harm really. It's just, you know, looking at the value for money you're going to get. What sort of a team are United going to select today against Athletic? They played Lens yesterday, you know what I mean, with more or less a full strength team. You'd imagine a lot of those will not play, maybe won't travel. I haven't seen the team yet, but I went before to one of those.
It's the Sampdoria one, was it?
It was the League of Ireland selection 2010, the opening fixture of the Aviva Stadium.
Maybe better if it's a League of Ireland selection today, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But and actually there's a great piece on Athletic by Neil O'Riordan in the Irish Sun I was trying to get to in a minute, but yeah, it was just an extremely costly enterprise. United played a second string side, and at least I suppose, as is mentioned in this piece in the Sunday Business Post, there was an Irish link, which is the whole kind of cover for the piece. Irish love affair with Man United has become an unrequited one, just because of the no presence of an Irish player in the squad. But United in 2010, the inaugural soccer match at the rebuilt Lansdowne saw a League of Ireland selection lose 7-1 to a Red Devils team that included both John O'Shea and Darren Gibson.
Yeah,
which I barely remember.
Well, it's holding up. The hold that Manchester United has on Irish fans is obviously holding up if this is selling out in minutes. And James McDermott pointing out in the Business Post that there are tickets still on sale for the Netherlands game in the autumn. Stephen Kenny's team.
And we've seen it in recent years. Like, you know, Liverpool, I think a few years ago picked a reserve team, and they still sold out. I think they played UCD reserves because they were in action as well, and it sells out. You know, the English team's coming to Dublin in the summer
to go anywhere,
but it's an afterthought in coming to the Irish tour now these days, isn't it? There's more money to be made elsewhere.
Where is the grab from? Is it from Match of the Day, the BBC? Is it from English culture? Is it from Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin, George Best, Johnny Giles, Frank Stapleton, Kevin Moran? Because it has stuck, and then it's the dad's generation, then it's the son's generation.
Yeah, I'm not sure the next generation are going to be Manchester United fans. Maybe they mightn't be reared on it as much, but that's United. Like, the piece above it is kind of maybe a little bit more enlightening. United's 900 million Adidas deal highlights club's enduring appeal globally. This is one of the biggest shirt deals ever signed. But United have had very little success in the last decade, so they're an enduring brand, and it kind of goes into why Adidas feel they need a new totem, and because Kanye West, going off the deep end a little bit, he was their Michael Jordan, so now they need a new one, so they're going with Man United. So United still have that worldwide appeal, and they've spread it into the Far East and America. The link is still there with Ireland for sure. There's Man United fans all over the country, but just for me personally, the idea of going to see a second
Would you go over now to the UK to watch?
Occasionally, yeah.
I know an Arsenal supporter from Dublin who was texting me. He was going to see Arsenal in the SoFi Stadium, like the biggest stadium in the NFL, with the wraparound screen, and I think it was costing him $120 or something like that. And he said, well, when's the next time I could see Arsenal play our hated rivals, MLS All-Stars? But like, that's, you're talking about the west coast of America, and Arsenal, when it comes to global appeal, are in the halfpenny place compared to Manchester United. And this, maybe to link it into a piece that Dan MacDonald has in the Sunday Indo today about Saudi Arabia. The largesse of the Premier League was nearly its kind of strength, and it's quite funny to watch the dynamic now, where its very financial largesse is no longer its strength, because the money that Saudi Arabia are throwing at players and managers and kind of Premier League institutions is obviously high enough to get them over there. But the one thing that they're never going to do for whatever reason, over the past 10, 20, 30 years, whatever way the Premier League has marketed itself, whatever the way it has grown its brand as a league, not to mention how those big clubs have grown their brand globally, they have kind of taken over in that sense. You know, like
it is the global league.
Yeah, well,
the European Super League was destined to fail because the global league is the Premier League.
Yeah, like there's
huge growth in the States now ahead of it.
We'll go on. Any of us can go on holiday any part of the world tomorrow, and we'll see the same Manchester United shirts and the Arsenal shirts, as well as like Real Madrid and Barcelona. But there's at least 5 or 6 Premier League teams that are in that kind of global appeal category now. But Dan's piece is interesting insofar as he makes the point that there's a bit of the Schadenfreude, I think, for people who aren't that big in the Premier League, that, you know, they can no longer use the fact that they're the only place that players of a certain wage bracket can go now to make a living, because Saudi Arabia seem to be snapping up any sort of talent. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the Saudi Arabian project, because, you know, this has been tried in China, it's been tried in America. You know, a country throwing loads of money at players to bring them over, but the sheer scale of it now is such that it's hard to ignore.
There's so many little lines in Dan's piece that are worth picking out, and I've picked out a lot. I'll just mention one of them. He says, one contact in the football agency game says the reality is somewhat different. This is from the Saudi clubs, and it's circling around the finest of British football talent. Tales of Jordan Henderson earning £700,000 per week. I've got players on the phone to representatives and potential intermediaries to explore what the Middle East might hold for them. There aren't enough Saudi clubs to meet the demand. They are knocking back more than they are recruiting. It's a greedy, grubby business. So it's gas to think of
$700,000 a week.
Journeymen footballers in England, you know, banging down the door. Get me over there.
Unfortunately, on News Talk, we're not on $700,000 a week. Boys from the Basque stuff in the Sunday Times, lovely piece on all these people in football management from the same area, kind of San Sebastian, Bilbao, northern Spain. I didn't know that Arteta and Alonso were from the same area.
And Nuno Emery as well, and
Guipuzcoa.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of Alonso and Arteta as young lads, like teenagers.
What a centre midfield that would have been.
But it's not the best picture of the day. The best picture of the day, as I said, in Sunday World. Folks, check it out. Stephen Cluxton and Michael Fitzsimons in anguish as the Gooch puts the ball in the back of the net in 2011.
This piece, though, is very interesting insofar as, like, it makes the point that 4 of the 20 Premier League managers are all from an area with a population of under 200,000, stretching less than 40 kilometres.
Or Cork, basically.
Or Cork, yeah. And it's a really interesting piece because it kind of explores, you know, like I find that kind of thing fascinating. What are the conditions in a certain part of Ireland that make lots of really good hurlers, or what are the conditions, you know, in certain parts of Cuba that make really good boxers, or whatever it is, you know. And this seems to be, and this is the really interesting about Athletic Bilbao, is that, you know, Athletic Bilbao in the last 10 years, I think they've finished in the top half of La Liga 8 times. They finished 4th in 2014, 2015 maybe, and made the Champions League. But they do so using only Basque players, and that's incredible. Like, I mean, that's GAA level stuff. You know, that's really, really amazing. And I didn't realise that Real Sociedad employed the same policy until quite recently. So you've got 2 teams in La Liga, so they're basically dipping into the same small pool of players. But it makes the point that the reason so many, or it's Tom Allnut who writes it today in the Sunday Times, but he kind of puts forward the theory that because they have so few people there, a lot of players are encouraged to get involved in coaching at an early age because effectively they need them, and they obviously get opportunities then at these La Liga clubs. But it's probably not a very popular image, you know, the idea of an elite level footballer having this kind of sense of duty to the place and to the club that brought them through the ranks.
Juxtaposed with the Saudi Arabia article that you referenced in Dan McDonald. Just a couple of things before we finish up there. Boxing, obviously you're a boxing correspondent of The Sun, Kevin Byrne. Katie Taylor's fighting Chantal Cameron again in November, is it? Yes?
November the 25th, back at the 3 Arena, yeah.
Why is Katie doing this? It seemed from the fight in May that Chantal Cameron, at a higher weight, as it were, was stronger and bigger, and it was the clear winner. Does Katie have her pride? Does she believe that she can turn this around and upset the
I would say she's the most single-minded Irish athlete there's ever been, probably. She refuses to take a loss. She'll take the last loss on the chin, but she'll refuse to believe that there's no way she can turn it around. We haven't really heard from Taylor's side why they've taken it, and the hope, I suppose, for casual or for fans would have been that, okay, maybe get back down to your natural weight of lightweight, force Cameron now to lose a bit of weight, to come into your backyard and have her feeling the strain of the weight cut, and that would make Cameron the challenger for Taylor's belts. But it's probably just Taylor saying, no, exact same conditions, I lost, I'll win, and I'll give her some of the same lesson that she gave me. Taylor always has a shot at winning. I wouldn't put my house on it for sure, but I thought Cameron would win the fight until kind of fight week last time, and then Taylor's demeanour during fight week kind of convinced me that she was so comfortable, and she's such a big game player, or whatever way you want to put it, that her demeanour all week convinced me that she'd get the job done. I became more and more convinced as the week went on. Could end up going the same way again. It's the 3 Arena again. All this populous hot air, but Croke Park's finished now, is it? It's done, I'd say. Yeah. Especially had she won the fight with Cameron, the hype might have gone up a bit. A lot of some boxing promoters, I know there's a guy from Cork, Gary Hyde, says better to have 1,000 people outside and only 500 people in the arena, because then you create the one for the next one. And the 3 Arena against Cameron the first time would have done that. 9,000 people in or 8,000 people in, but another 80,000 people would like to go, and maybe wouldn't have bought tickets, but would like to go. That when a fighter takes a loss, that hype always erodes, dissipates a little bit. So Taylor's got a massive job in her hands, and Cameron is going to come back, and she'll have learned from the fight as well. Interesting comments from Katie's father, Pete. He said she didn't box well enough at all. She didn't use her feet. She can win if she makes it a boxing match. But I guess the commentary on Taylor is that maybe the fact that she didn't because she couldn't. She's a veteran at this stage. She's 37 just 37 now. Yeah. And a lot of 37 would be fine if she hadn't. She's had such a long career, she's boxing at the top level. She's there with a target on her back, the best of the best, for 23 or 4 years at this stage. So it's a long way to go. I'm just wondering, just to finish, Conor, McKeon, will Joe Schmidt be our nemesis at the Rugby World Cup? David Walsh, the back of Sunday Times, the exciting wing play of Will Jordan and the tackling nous of Joe Schmidt have rejuvenated All Blacks purring and back in form at the right time for another World Cup tilt. Just quoted here, from November 2021 to August last year, they lost 6 of 8 tests. There were plenty who thought they should change their head coach Ian Foster, but a year out from a World Cup, New Zealand Rugby Union was not prepared to do that. Instead, the former Ireland head coach Joe Schmidt was appointed attack coach and selector. A year on, his influence is easy to see, especially on the precision and speed of the All Blacks ruck ball. And also to add here later in the piece, Schmidt may well have got the pre-World Cup camp wrong in 2019, but he is as far from mindless as any coach could be, and Ireland would not be where they are now without his contribution. Do we need a better appraisal of Joe Schmidt and what he did for Ireland? 2 Champions Cups with Leinster, 3 Six Nations titles, a Grand Slam, beating the All Blacks for the first ever time in Chicago, beating them here. Well, I view rugby sort of from a mid-distance, to the point where every time the World Cup comes around, I assume that the All Blacks are going to win it, and inevitably you kind of are proved right more often than you're proved wrong. But David Walsh makes a very convincing argument to the case here. I sense the kind of a bit like Ireland in reverse, that the All Blacks kind of body clock revolves around the World Cup, that they seem to be able to, in any cycle, they go through some period of however brief or however existential crisis. It's almost nearly the thing that prompts the rebuild to come around to World Cup time. But no, the Schmidt factor is just really interesting there. The pressure that the All Blacks are under to perform when they come to World Cup time. But I don't even know some of the names that David Walsh is talking about here, and these are going to be the stars at the next World Cup. So it just goes to show you what New Zealand are always working with. And the prospect of Ireland again playing them in the quarterfinals, that doesn't sound particularly appetising at this point. And I think it would be a crying shame that if Ireland were to kind of break the cycle and keep their form of the previous years going into the World Cup, were they to be the second best team in it, but run into New Zealand in the quarterfinal or France, it would be a disaster. I think, John, on that, David Walsh has slightly buried the lead a little bit, because it's the most interesting part of the article for sure, and especially when he gets to the discourse, I guess, around Ireland's previous World Cup. O'Connell and Henderson spoke about it during the week, about it being, we're not doing the mind numbing, playing rugby now. And I think Craig Casey described it as, I heard it was barbaric off the lads, and he gives Dan Sheehan's quote saying, there's not going to be any mindless army boot camps or any of that crap. I'd say in the classic, Joe Schmidt might have learned in his short time in Ireland to pin a little article up on the dressing room wall for that, because we could meet the All Blacks in the quarterfinals, couldn't we? And that could be tasty enough.
Just think Joe gets a bit of a bad press now.
We always fall out with our managers, though. Don't we? Look at Vera Powell, it ends.
I just feel like we got short memories when it comes to people that put us on the map, and everything is through the prism of the World Cup, and there's no guarantee that Andy Farrell will succeed at this World Cup.
No, but there's enough. Like, even mentioned the people who are involved in the backroom there, mentioning Henderson and Paul O'Connell. That idea, the very basic idea of a losing IQ, that if you eventually you'll run out of ways to lose. Ireland have surely made every mistake possible at this stage going into the World Cup, and there are enough of people around that camp who were present and experienced and contribute to those mistakes that
it'll be whether we're good enough or not now.
I think so.
Well, we got another like Vera Powell again. We fall out with our managers. We've got the group of death in the World Cup, so we've got a difficult group straight into a hellish quarter final against France or New Zealand, so it's going to be difficult even getting past the quarterfinals again.
Okay, Kevin Byrne from the Irish Sun and Conor McKeon from the Irish Independent, thank you so much for your insight and wisdom today on the Sunday Paper Review.
Cheers, John.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate your time. Just going to go through some scores before we go to the break here. Meath 1-1, Derry 1-8. Derry leading the Camogie Intermediate Final. Clare won earlier on. And in football, Cardiff leads Leeds United by 2-0 in the Championship earlier on. Leicester beat Coventry by 2-1. We will talk football